opposition.
Our turn for speaker, please.
Closing government.
First speaker, Kajal Shiva. Sehelachi.
And closing opposition.
Mmula, low person.
Alright, thank you. And with that, we can get started with the opening government. Prime Minister, to start this debate on the motion, this House would actively encourage women not to have children. Sorry, before you start, my pens are having some issues. Whenever you're ready. Yep.
This house will actively encourage women not to have children. So in my speech, I went to do the definitions and the status quo and how we think that what is a problem in this moment and why we think that this is the best solution for this problem. So actively encourage is that type of narratives that normally we have in our society, for example, on media, or for example, of society that is saying to you every time you have to, or you don't know have to do something, is that narrative and that speech that you have to try and you have to the other people understand that you have to say. And women not to have children, but like don't have to children, we are going to speak about how is the process to have a children, why do we think that is not the better in this moment of the story. So we have that this moment we have another problem. What is the problem here? That in the past, for example, the narrative and the integrative encourage was the opposite. For example, if you were a woman, you had to take a children to be an important part of the society. You had to have children to be important in the society. We have problems because in the past, for example, the women that are, for example, sterile, they wasn't the same opportunities, they was rejected, they was opposite, and they was tried in a bad way because they had not the possibilities to have a children. In the past, for the society, it was very important to have a children because the contexts are very different. For example, the narratives that we have, that we are seeing about, speak about in the past, for example, there wasn't sticks but science, there wasn't stick medical technology, there wasn't sticks other things that we have, and for that reason in the past was very, very important the value of the family, for example, the value of the species perpetuation, and the value for this kind of society in general. But now we have another values, and what is the relationship between the values and the narratives? That the narratives depends on values that our society have in a determinate moment of the history. For example, in the past, for the society was very important the value of the family, and they were very important the value of species perpetuation. But now we have the context is very, very different. We have a context because now, for example, we are overpopulation, the planet is over people, and now we have more people that the planet can accept and is prepared to have in the set. And now we have other kind of values, like for example, family, it's okay, the value of family now exists, it's okay, but we think that the most important value in this moment in our society is not necessarily the family, it's more the freedom and the opportunity to show us what are the women are seeking. We can recognize one thing in this report, and is that actually there are movements of feminist movements that I asking, and they are the own speech about not to have children, but we think that it is not enough. Why? Because in the past the form was very, very actively in comparison with that thing. In this moment of the history, we can see movements, feminist movements that have this speech to not have children, but we have that it is not a
point.
a narrative and a balance in equilibrium.
Choice feminism says that you give women the ability to decide what they want in society. Why is that inherently harmful?
Yeah, we are agree with that, and we see that they are not free alone. Why they are not free in this moment? Because even if we have another narratives in this moment, even if we have another groups or another feminist currents that I say to you, you don't need to do a mother, you don't need to be a mother, or you don't need to use health, for example, is not enough, because in the past the narrative was stronger. The past the narrative was stronger. So even if in this moment we have currencies that have this kind of speech, is not enough, because it's not the same force that they have in the past. For example, in the past it was very important to a woman to be a mother. It was very important to stay in the house, take care of the children. They were very important, all those things. And the important thing here is that narratives work good. What is the narrative work, and why do we think that this narrative and the narratives in general are a good solution for this problem? We think that in the past it worked. Why? In the past the narrative was, hey, you have to be a mother, hey, you have to stay in your house with your husband, and this worked. Why? Because in this moment women accepted the speech, and women, they say, oh yes, is the rest of my life I have to be a mother, the rest of my life I have to be with my husband. The narratives works because the narratives have a bigger influence in the people that are hearing this kind of narratives. So we think that the narratives is the best way to combat all the old narrative that we have, and we think that we agree with the question that you say to us, and it's yes, we have women that have more freedom and that have more empowerment over themselves. But the problem is that it's not enough with the movement that actually we have, because the narrative in the past was stronger and very much stronger than the narrative that we have in this moment. So we have to balance narratives, and we think that this is the best way. We have our idea in government is not necessarily that women don't have to be mothers. No. If they want to be mothers, it's okay. But we think that in this moment they are not free. They are not free to choose what they want, because in the past they were assuming a role, a stereotype in the society. They are assuming a place where they have to go there. So if we think that if we want that they have their own decision, it's better to balance narratives and to say, hey, in the past you have to do that, but in this moment I can and I want to accept you, and I have you to have more incentives to not be a mother, because I think that it's probably better for you like a woman if you have more time for yourself, if you, for example, have more time to be to study, to grow, and to dedicate to yourself. You know the dependencies that we have in the past, that you have important if you have children and if you take care of health. So with this problem that we are facing here is to balance narratives, and how this is very necessary and very important to the women are really free to decide what they want, because in the past the narratives was very stronger, and is not enough even if we in this moment have movement currents or movement feminist movements that have said and that have her own speak. We think that is most important, and for that reason we defend the actively encourage, because we say that it's not enough with passive. It's not saying that even one movement or two movements in the feminists are saying to you, no, it's not necessary that you have a thing, but to contrast them and to balance narratives, we think that a freedom is very important here, and is better defined in our state of the house.
Thank you very much for that speech. I'd like to now invite the Leader of Opposition.
While we did not hear almost anything regarding the additional burdens that women face when they decide to rear children, we expected to come up at some point in this debate. But we believe that there are other alternatives to solving those harms apart from just not having children whatsoever. Because, For instance, in countries like Sweden, you can have mandatory paternal leave that is divided between like maternal and paternal leaves, and fathers have to do that. If we have the power in the society to encourage some behavior, I believe we should better encourage this behavior, or we should encourage like flexible working hours, or maybe a lot of NGOs that support mothers from disadvantaged backgrounds, or allow them to still have careers, educations, like things like that. We believe that at our stage in the society, women do not have to experience those harms if they do decide to become mothers. So we believe that harms that the government can bring in this debate, they are solvable by other means. They can be mitigated. But this policy brings additional harms that we believe are extremely important. First of all, it perpetuates the same idea in the society that women cannot decide for themselves what they should or want to do. Because the government tells us there is a dominant narrative in the society what the women should do, that they have to rear children. But what you are proposing to do is replace this dominant narrative with a different narrative of what women should do. And regardless of whether it is better for a woman to have a child or not to have a child, both those situations basically assume that women do not have agency, that women cannot decide for themselves and cannot make that choice. You're saying that the narrative of rearing children or having children is extremely dominant, but you do not tell us why it is important to encourage them not to have children, and why it is not enough to just promote choice for women. We believe promoting choice for women may be extremely powerful when you do that, when you spend a lot of time for that, when you create promotional videos, when you have talks, lectures on that point, when you elect members of parliament who promote policies that do that. What is more important is that some women will still make a choice to have children. And we believe that those women run a risk of being marginalized in the feminist community that should be out there to support them in the first place. How is that happening? Basically, if you create this narrative in the society, this narrative will be most dominant within the feminist community because, of course, it's connected to women's rights, and your reason for this narrative is to protect women and so on. And that would mean that a lot of women feminists out there, they will think that those girls who do decide to have children, they did not do what a woman should do in order to promote the welfare of all women, in order to break the stereotypes, in order to not make other women if one woman is having a child, she is basically promoting the stereotypes that women should or could or are mothers and so on. And that will be something that a lot of progressives will think. And they may not support those women as much. They may not maybe support the NGOs that support women from mothers from disadvantaged backgrounds, because they see those women as gender traitors or something. They see those women as some... Yeah, please.
Do you think the feminist movement shuns women who choose not to have abortions?
At this point, no, because there is a dominant narrative in the feminist movement that women should decide for themselves what they want and should do. If you create a different dominant narrative within the feminist movement, then those women who do not conform to that narrative will be shunned. Because, women who choose to pursue very traditional marriage or very traditional gender roles and so on, they are already shunned in many places within the feminist community because they are seen as perpetuating gender stereotypes. And because in the feminist community there is an idea that you have to break gender stereotypes, that you do not have to conform to them and so on. If we create a new dominant narrative, that would mean that women run a risk of being marginalized because of that reason. And of course that will be of course, and those women will be like the most victimized already, because they tend to be like maybe from traditional families, maybe from poorer backgrounds, maybe they did not have as much education or something, and they need the support of the feminist community the most. And they may be denied that support, and they may be denied the only safe space they have within that feminist community when they are marginalized, and when they tell to their feminist friends, yeah, well, my child just went to primary school, and their feminist friends, your child? What? Why would you have a child? Like, you will not feel welcome there, you will not feel nice there. And we believe that it is important, it's very important to avoid that harm. Yes?
You are free to take your own decision when you have both narratives in the same level. And in the status quo, the women have not in the same level because generation and generation has agreed that they have to be married.
As I already said, like, there is no reasoning why it is not enough to promote the choice for women and not the opposing narrative. If the opposing narrative is stronger in some areas of society, that means if you converse with the people from those groups within the society, you will be pressured not to have that child. Okay? And also, we believe that some women do make a choice, a rational choice, to have children, because children can bring a lot of happiness to a person who has them. Because overwhelming majority of mothers and fathers say that they love their children, that having children was like one of the best decisions in their life, because they are bringing something new to this world. They are basically, they give upbringing to the person. They can like create that person to some extent. They can impart their ideas, their knowledge. They can love that person, care for their achievement. And we believe if there will be women who will be pressured not to have children, they may miss out on that additional happiness that is extremely strong, and those hormones and everything else. And that is why we're extremely proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech. I'd like to now invite the Deputy Prime Minister here.
Mainly, their argumentation relies on the concept of choice. What we do answer from the Afghan government is that there is the real freedom of choice and the delusion of choice. Why do we talk about this? Because you have an actual freedom, a complete freedom, and you can make a rational decision, as you have talked about making rational decisions, when you have the complete information, when you know the consequences of a pregnancy. Because a pregnancy is not a simple thing. It has everlasting consequences on your body. It has everlasting consequences for the rest of your life, because you are taking responsibility for another human being. And this is a decision that has to be taken really, really seriously. Like, to put it in some way, this is like a huge bet in which you are like putting all the money in front of you, and you have to be like really determined to take that choice. And we do prefer the case in which the women actually prefer not to take that choice, and if they want to do so, it is because they are really, really, really sure, they are really, really, really determined to do so. Why? Because we can talk about many women about the world. Who are these many women? These many kinds of women. The determined ones that they really do want to have a child, which eventually wouldn't be affected by the narrative, or perhaps could be affected, but not to that extent. Because in the past, with other narratives, we have seen that these narratives have a huge influence. In the average people, like most of the people, like they have a broad influence, but it doesn't have a huge influence on people that are already determined to be against these narratives. For example, people who took the determination to not have children, women who didn't want to have children, even in the times in which the mainstream narrative was the one that they had the duty, they have this work to have children. So eventually these women are going to be affected, and if they are going to be affected, it is not to a big extent. And in comparison, we think that even if we assume that they might be rejected, even if we do accept that, there are more benefits, but we are going to be beyond that. also, we're talking about the undecided women. I mean, this motion is about them. This motion is about these women who are like in the middle ground, like, hey, I don't know if I want to have a children. A friend of mine did have a child, and I don't know if I want to follow them. Then I have the child, and I just regret myself. And this is something important to bear in mind, because this is a decision that you, cannot take back. Once you have a child, and well, and he or she wasn't aborted, you can kill the baby, you can kill the child, you can kill the adolescent once this person has grown up. So this is something that goes far, but it cannot be reversed in any way. We think that it's better to step away and be really, really, really determined. So we think that it is better for these undecided women, which are like one of the, which is where one of the biggest impacts falls on this house, because we do have the problem of the narrative that creates a tendency for these women to choose this side, but we want to make things even, so they have both sides, or even if we do a similar case in which our narrative just changes all the minds, perhaps on this side, because there are more benefits, because they are not taking a step, they are not taking a decision that has everlasting consequences for the rest of their lives, without reversing the point.
Like, if you're so for the rational choice, you can promote a narrative for rational choice in having children. You can tell women all the benefits and all the negative sides of that, so that they could make a rational choice. Do not pressure them to make one day or the other.
Yeah, but we have to bear in mind the nature of social narratives and how they work in society. They work in how, in some sort of a long-term nature. So, if we do use a narrative of, a middle ground at this moment, as there was this narrative already of them to have the duty, to have the labor, to bring children to the world. This is not going to work so fast. This may work in a longer term. We think that the direct opposite narrative, which is that they should not have children, can actually bring faster results. Even, you are still talking about a long term, but this is not as long term as we're talking about. We're talking about a long term that is closer to the current moment, to this day, and can bring the benefits to other women in the world. Why? Because the other measures that we are talking about, for example, the Swedish parental leave, it's not something that happens in the whole world. Some privileged countries in Europe, like Sweden, like Switzerland, like Norway, may have this. But other countries in the world, like many countries in South America, and Central America, Africa, Southeast Asia, etc., they just cannot have this. What do they have? Something that is not that expensive to achieve, something that works in the long term, but has broad effects, as the previous narratives have shown to work with a really broad and big effect around the world, such as the narrative for them to be mothers. But now, on the other side, for them to not be mothers. If the narratives through time can spread to the whole world and reach all the women, regardless of their income, regardless of their social context, regardless of all these other factors, we think that they may be safer in an environment. They will have better opportunities to not take a wrong decision that lasts for their whole life. Your point, sir.
Patriarchy is not encouraging women to have children. Patriarchy is assuming that women can't take good decisions and imposing whatever it is that you think is right for them. Tell us why that's a good thing.
Sorry, can you repeat it again, sir?
Patriarchy is not encouraging women to have children. Patriarchy is assuming that women can't take good decisions and imposing whatever it is that you think is right for them.
But that's what you're saying. What we have told us is that actually there's a history of social narratives for them expected to be mothers that stem from a context in which there was a war that my partner already explained, in which there was a lack of population because people were, really dying all the time because due to disease, lack of vaccines, lack of medical technology, etc., etc., etc. So the solution what was the solution? To tell women to have more children, so we could perpetuate humankind. But that's no longer the case. And this is actually the narrative that you have to explain why this narrative is not true, because we consider that it's fair. As opponent opposition have accepted that this narrative does exist. So what have we told you here? We have weighted both values. They have talked about choice, but we talk about the real freedom that comes versus the delusion of freedom. They offer you the delusion of freedom when you are, when you are like in a trap in which you have these narratives ingrained, which actually provokes a problem, that because your decisions are going to be biased. We do want to offer another alternative, the complete opposite. So this can balance out the narratives, so you can take a better decision. And even if you are biased now to the other side, at least you are not taken and instead you are taking a decision that's going to last for your whole life because there wasn't any other alternative, and this is a better case for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. What's the matter?
I'm so sorry.
So, dear panel, their opening government tell us about one big narrative in the whole the world, but we should know that countries are different. The way that the amount of rights that women have there is different. The views, the religion there, and the power of this religion is different. So, what we are talking here, that in developed countries, there are narratives about choice. There are narratives that you don't have to have a child like 100%. So there we are having the normal conversations that you don't have to be the best mom in the world. You just can be okay. That there are not all rainbows and sunshine. That you have some difficulties when you're having a child. So the most realistic stories are one told by the mothers who are showing you that you won't be the perfect mother, that you will have troubles, but it's still good, and there is a bad side, there is a good side, but actually it's my life, I'm happy with it. So there is all the information that we are needing. And more to that, women are having less children when they are more educated, when they have more opportunities to build their career, because they are taking the decisions more careful. They want to have mindful pregnancies. They want to have their mindful parenthood, so they are not making 5, 6, 7 children just because they know that this is a hard work. So, no, thank you. So what we are talking here, that when they are telling us that there are some places that narrative is so strong that we need to beat it with the narrative, with the opposing narrative, we are telling you that this won't work. And why? Because we have countries with high rates of newborns to every person. In these countries, most of all, they don't have a lot of they're mostly developing countries. There is strong religion, and this religion is mostly pro-children. So the children are the best treasures for these people. They are growing up thinking that when you having a child is good, when you have your son who will take your family name, it's good. So to these countries, this narrative is just unbelievable. They won't take it because their whole government is religious. And so when we are talking that we want to give freedom to the women, first of all, these women are not seeing their children as a problem. They see it as a happiness, so they will reject these ideas. So the women that we can talk to, the women that we can interact into feminism, to try to give them some kind of to teach them about the protection, to show them that you can work, that you can teach, and maybe these women would be more mindful, and for them later to have less children, to take care of the children, to have control over their lives. No, thank you. So we are telling that these women who are now having less power, maybe in some places they don't have rights to own property, they don't have rights to drive a car, they cannot take their the whole years of education because they are marginalized when they are having their periods. So these women, first of all, they need not to tell that they don't should have a child, because it won't work, because they don't have power. They are believing in children. It is maybe the only joyful thing in their life. And so their fathers who have control of their lives, their husbands and brothers who have control of their life, they're thinking that all these feministic ideas, maybe I like previous because I think that, well, okay, I love my wife, I love my sister, maybe if she wants to study, let her study. If she wants to be healthy, let her be healthy. But the child question is just unbelievable for us. Is a one big stop sign for us to interact with all these ideas. So what? No, thank you. So what we are telling you here, that this narrative won't be overpowered by your new narrative. But when you are seeing the feminists, you are thinking, this so crazy ladies who don't want to have a child. Why you don't want to have a child? Maybe something wrong with you. We are closing for these men who have the power over the women. We are closing us to these women who came to us and learned little by little. There is no way we can change the situation in those countries where they are still mutilating little girls because they think that it's okay and that it's right. We are closing all these opportunities that we have here today, because I can stand here, I can travel, I was able to study in my university because of all this, right? We are closing for all this, millions of women to study, to have their right of property. So we are telling you that women in the West, they are having it now, so they are trying to have their mindful way to have a child. We are working on that. So these women are figuring out how to be a mother, how to be a successful person, and that's okay. But these your ways to reverse the situation for their less developed countries, it's all wrong. It's too harsh. It won't be taken, and all the progress that we are having today, that women in Saudi Arabia can drive now, it will be lost to us. And we are telling you that you want to tell women what to do, and we think that is wrong, and that the narrative so harsh won't be taken. And we are telling you that even your policy is working just a little bit, that I will have less information because my favorite feminist author won't write about pregnancy. I will have less ability to talk about it, less ability to have some good that I can have today when my pregnancy is okay. And we are telling you that all this will just lead all these women to suffering, and that's why I'm happy to oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now we'd like to start the back half of the debate, and I'd like to welcome up the member of government here.
Constantly throughout your life that the only goal that you should have in life is to have a child, to become a mother, because it is one of the most fulfilling things that you will ever do. That is something that, aside closing government, we cannot stand for. We accept that in today's debate there are still going to be women who want to have children, who find it fulfilling, who find value in that. We accept those women, we respect those women, we think they will still exist. What we're going to be showing you in today's debate is that for women who don't want to have children, this narrative is incredibly damaging to them, and it's incredibly damaging to their psyche, their quality of life, and furthermore, to the quality of life to the children that they have, but also just in children in general, right? But before I get onto my extension in terms of like the role of mothers, but also ideas of like overpopulation and like antinatalism, I'm going to be doing a bit of analysis, a bit of rebuttal rather, on opening opposition, and the main idea that they spoke to us was choice, right? They tell us two things. Firstly, they tell us that as government, we're no longer giving women choice, right? And secondly, these women, by not having children, are going to be shunned by the feminist movement, right? Our first response is that under the opposition, we don't get true choice to begin with, right? The nature of this narrative is firstly that it's incredibly dominant, right? Therefore, it's the prevailing narrative in society that women's only role and the only way they will ever be happy is to have children. Secondly, we tell you that it's an incredibly forceful narrative, right? That means that it makes women feel like they aren't real women if they're not having children. We think that that actively takes away the choice of women. We tell you that when we actively disencourage women from having children, we show them that other options are firstly viable, but second legitimate, allowing them greater access to choice. But then secondly, we don't think that they're necessarily going to be shunned by the feminist movement, right? Like, that's just incredulous. We think that the feminist movement doesn't shun women who've been abused, despite like trying to get them out of those abusive relationships, even though those women don't leave those relationships for their own personal reasons. We tell you that they often receive more support by the feminist movement. We don't think that this argument particularly stands in today's debate. But in terms of extension, first idea I'm going to be talking to you about is the role of mothers in two specific aspects. Firstly, in terms of childbirth, and secondly, in the household. When we talk about childbirth, what we need to recognize in this debate is that it is an incredibly risky, incredibly painful experience for many women. We tell you many women die across the world every single day from having children. Furthermore, we tell you that infant mortality is a very real, very scary, very extreme phenomenon that happens in many underdeveloped countries, but also very often in the Western world, right? We think that there are a couple of issues that we need to discuss here. Firstly, we tell you that childbirth is just an active healthcare risk to women, right? We think that like the risk of death is so high, that's not necessarily something we like want women to go into uninformed. Secondly, we tell you that it's just incredibly like unsafe and painful. Right? Often women don't have access to the right sorts of medication, don't have access to the right sorts of doctors. A lot of women have to end up having children at home without access to things like epidurals, without access to things like medication that makes their childbirth much better. But then thirdly, we tell you that there's a psychological damage that happens when you lose a child. Right? We tell you that this is particularly harmful because the guilt and the blame is put on the mother alone. They're the one who has to deal with the brunt of that on their own. We don't think that these are things that can be like fixed and saved by creating things like paternity leave and like counter narratives that opening up want us to, because we don't think that men have the ability to experience childbirth and to give birth. These are harms inherent on a woman. These aren't something that can be fixed by that. We think that by actively disencouraging women from having children, we allow them to go through less pain. We think that that's an incredibly important benefit that we create in this way. But secondly, let's talk about the role of women in the household, right? We tell you that women really do a lot of unpaid physical and emotional labor in their houses. Women, like in most cultures, in most marriages, in most parts of society, women are responsible for cleaning, for cooking, for taking care of things around the house. We tell you often when kids are born, the mother takes on the responsibility of taking care of that child entirely, right? So we think that what we have here is a direct response to open opposition, in the fact that women now have less energy and ability and effort to put into other things that they care about and find fulfilling, like their career, right? We think what we ultimately do at the end of this debate is harm women's ability to self-actualize. We think that that's particularly harmful. That's not something that we accept in today's debate. By actively encouraging women not to have children, we allow women to pursue things that they value. Closing.
All the problems that you give, we see them. Why is it like women's burden to solve overpopulation and poverty and access to all these health things?
Okay, so it's not women's burden, right? But what we tell you that it is that women are the ones who are told that they need to have children. This burden does not exist on men. Men are allowed to do whatever they want in their lives. The narrative that's created in society is that women are the people who need to have children. Therefore, they are like the sole responsibility. They have the sole responsibility to have children. We think if we want to fix these issues, we have to actively disencourage them from doing it. But furthermore than that, I told you that there's a lot of personal benefits to women for not having children. Please engage with that. Okay, thirdly, let's look at this idea of postnatal depression. Panel, we tell you that this is an incredibly painful mental experience, something that is not taken seriously in large parts of the world, and not in underdeveloped countries, but also in many Western countries. Postnatal depression is something that isn't seen as a valid experience, right? We tell you that the reason it's not taken seriously is because women are expected to have children. Women are expected to love that child, and psychological effects that they undergo aren't seen as being taken seriously, right? We tell you that the benefit of access actively disencouraging women from having children is that now women who experience postnatal, is firstly, okay, less women experience postnatal depression. We think it's a very serious harm. It's something, if we can limit it, that's something we would like. But secondly, we think that women who truly wanted to have children that now experience postnatal depression will be taken seriously, because now the medical field has to recognize that there is actually something wrong, something that needs to be dealt with. We create a benefit here. But then fourthly, we look at women who are unable to have kids, right? We talk about infertile women, unhealthy women who's unsafe to give birth, and trans women. We think that they're made to feel worse under this narrative when they're told that they have to have kids and now they can't. They're told that they're not real women. Okay, cool. On to antinatalism. We tell you firstly, being born is not a consensual act. Children don't have the ability to opt into being born. It's something that the parents decide. Secondly, we think that on a balance of probabilities, when we look at the nature of the world and the fact that existence is incredibly harmful, with war, poverty, and death being an inevitability, we tell you that you're always going to endure more harm than pleasure during existence. We tell you two things because of this. We tell you that when you have children, despite knowing this, firstly, you're being incredibly immoral because you know these children are going to suffer. This is something particularly harmful. But secondly, you're being incredibly selfish because people have children because of things like legacies and to fill an emotional void, despite knowing that this harm is going to exist. We tell you that this is in the debate, we're the only people who talk about not only women, but secondly, why we should actively stop women from making choices that harm other people. Lastly, in terms of overpopulation, we tell you that the world is reaching its capacity, the quality of life is getting increasingly worse for people because of lack of resources and global warming. We tell you that when we actively disencourage women from having children, we create we have less people on the earth. Firstly, we save children from suffering, and secondly, we make the existence of those that are born much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech. I'd like to welcome the member of opposition.
Particularly want to have children. I think it's going to be unsafe. I think it's going to be uncomfortable. I think it's going to ruin my future career as a successful lawyer. But every time I think this, I feel unbelievably guilty because I think about what my family will say. I think about what the rest of society will say. I think that makes me somehow less of a woman. We need to understand in this debate that when we, as the House or as the state, take this position, promote this narrative, we are not doing so in a vacuum. We are doing so in a society where the counter-narrative already exists. And so we get a false burden from closing opposition that we somehow have to provide both narratives. That's just completely unnecessary when the counter-narrative already exists. The only way to balance that, the only effective way to balance that is for us to take a consistent stance, a consistently opposing stance, right? So engage with context if you want to enter this debate. The major clash in this debate was that of choice, right? So in terms of choice, what I'm going to be doing is showing you why we maximize choice under our model and how free, rational choice doesn't exist currently. But secondly, I'm going to be showing you why, assuming that we are limiting choice, we're okay with that. We're fine with limiting choice because this choice harms women and furthermore harms other actors within society, something that no other side has actually engaged with, right? Let's talk about choice and the maximization of choice, right? Firstly, when do we get maximized choice and agency? We tell you that that's when people make free and rational choices. That's when their choices are informed and they're without coercion. We apply this metric when we look at the political choices or the votes that we value, for example, right? Is choice rational and informed in the status quo? No, right? We tell you we have and we've spoken about this a lot, the dominance of a narrative that women should have children, should derive incredible happiness and value from those children, right? We tell you that like most women don't have access to any counter-narrative in society. The only information they get that like concedes to an opening is like good information about how like wonderful it is to raise a child. Why do you think people only speak about how nice it was to raise children? Because if they said it was like horrible, we'd think they were terrible people. If someone told you they regretted having a child, you would probably judge them, right? Because it's seen as something that should just be objectively true. We think you allow people to speak out about how potentially that wasn't a particularly good choice for them when you have a narrative, especially one coming from the state, that's different, right? But furthermore, like, because women often don't have access to like proper sex education and stuff, we don't see how that counter-narrative exists under your model, right? Like, they give us alternatives, like promoting choice instead of promoting like a counter-narrative through things like awareness programs. We tell you those are not going to be nearly effective enough to sway the way up that people are going to be making, right? Why? Because the narrative that you should have children comes from your family, it comes from your church, it comes from your communities. It's such an incredibly powerful, dominant force that simply saying you should make free choices, here is information, isn't enough like to deal with it. We have to look at this on a comparative, right? If we were like on a scale where on one side women are forced to not have children, on the other side women are forced to have children, and in the middle ground women can make free choices. We have to understand that in the status quo we are significantly closer to the point at which women are forced to have children. And the only way to move us closer to this desirable middle ground is by taking that extreme action on the other side of the spectrum, right?
On that.
We get a harm from opening about how when women do choose this, they're going to be shunned by the feminist movement. They completely mischaracterize the feminist movement when they do this. They assume firstly that the feminist movement is homogenous, when actually the characterization they give us is that of like the most radical, extremist feminists who would maybe do that, right? We tell you in the status quo, like women who marry men are not shunned by the feminist movement, even when the feminist movement says men are trash. Women who stay in abusive relationships aren't shunned by the feminist movement, even though the feminist movement can tell you that objectively that's a bad thing to do and we would encourage you to not do that, right? We think that the vast majority of the feminist movement, if we're excluding those radicals, are like moderate people who are likely going to be like, we think you should make this choice, but we're okay with you not making that choice, especially since you've characterized the feminist movement as being a movement that cares so very much about choice and stuff like that, right? So we tell you that like we maximize choice under our models for those reasons. We then get told by opening that like in some countries this can't be effective, and what it's going to do is create some type of backlash and turning away from the feminist movement. We tell you firstly that even in conservative countries those aren't homogenous blocks. There still exist more liberal bubbles where we think that this narrative that we promote would be in some way effective. We like have debaters here from Saudi Arabia who I've been speaking to about feminism, engage with like realistically that there are some people within these countries who we can still provide some benefit to. But secondly, right, like if these people in these countries are so heavily conservative, chances are that like they're going to have this backlash reaction to any ideal that feminism promotes, right? That like women should just work, and we don't think that means we shouldn't promote those ideas in general. Can I say?
Yeah. While there are bubbles of feminism, in the rest of the society, the idea of child may be sacred, and that means that those women that are most important to you are not going to buy into this idea and going to be alienated.
Okay, so my second response there deals with that even if that is the case, that doesn't mean feminism shouldn't push for ideas that are objectively better for women in the same way that we push for like women being able to work, even though in many conservative countries that would create backlash and isolation anyway. That doesn't mean we should abandon our ideals, right? Next level, even assuming that we are limiting choice, why is that okay? We think it's okay as a society to limit choice in two instances. Firstly, where your choice harms yourself. Secondly, where your choice harms other people. Why does this choice harm women themselves, right? We told you quite nicely, Cardinal gives you lots of examples about the many ways that you harm women. Like, we get no analysis about why like feminism that prioritizes choice is the best type of feminism. We tell you that many forms of feminism prioritize what is objectively good for women. That's like why we encourage women to leave abusive relationships, for example. you that many of like the alternatives they give you, Cardinal tells you, aren't entirely applicable to women. They're not accessible at all, right? We tell you, you also hurt others. We don't get any real response for that. As a society, we have the duty to protect women and unborn children and the rest of the world.
And then let's have the opposition whip close out the debate. Hear, hear.
I'm going to do a bit of old school styles debating because it's very necessary in today's debate. Completely missed by government. Lastly, as closing government, they say in their whip speech, they give you new analysis. They say, one, that when choice harms yourself, you should limit it. They say that the choice that women take in making babies or having children is so intense that we need to actively do something to stop those individuals going through postnatal depression, doing general ideas of how they die in infant mortality. This means that it has to assume that the government has to impose that women should not have children in all its instances because the choice that they make is so harmful and incredibly should be removed. We think when you say you actively encourage women to not have children, that does not incentivize women firstly to not have children. So the buy-in of women having children in the first place has to show that all these harms should be imposed on people. We think them not telling us is that the government is going to impose or actively encourage women to not have children. Like for an example, in China, say that parents do not have as many children in society. Or is it going to be the feminist movement perpetuating ideas and say that when you have children, patriarchy still exists in your society? We think that new analysis in the speech would have won them that debate, but it came extremely late. Secondly, they tell you that women do not get counter narrative in certain states. This means that you have to allow women to get the counter narrative in those states and not also dominating, give them those ideas. Opening says, and this is very explicit, I'm going to quote them verbatim, this is for the undecided woman. This means that if women at the moment are undecided, creating a new narrative which says that women should not have children means that the dominant narrative is going to be what? The dominant is saying women should not have children. This means there's no balance of comparative or any narratives in society, but this simply means that this is going to stifle the ability for women to make the choice in which was happening in general status quo. Please sit down. Lastly, the general idea of old school style is that this often assumes that the actor in which is doing this has to impose these ideas. We think Mmula clearly tells you that imposition of ideas is explicitly harmful because it allows for individuals to not have the choice to make a rational idea and conception of how society and reality should be. Mmula tells you specifically that human beings are very complex, that some people want to have children for the absolute fulfillment of their own. That means that they want to allow women to have the best lives in those certain societies. But also this has to assume that these people are in the worst kind of societies in the first place. This means that this debate has to assume that it exists in conservative societies where women are so marginalized and women are so harmed that we have to do something about it. In more liberal states, women don't just have children because men said they should. Women have children because of the self-identification in which these women have, and that also is very important in today's debates. Let me start with closing governments. The first one, they tell you that the roles of mothers is inherently harmful, that women die and infant mortality happens a lot, that losing a child is very painful for women, no, please sit down, and also that the ideas that they share is antinatalists. We think they don't understand what antinatalism is. And antinatalist means that even if you're a man, even if you're a woman, don't have a child because existing is a risk. This means that even any form of existence in itself should not be justified because existence in itself is a risk. This does not mean they prioritize women in any sort of instance, but it also assumes that women and men should not have children because that is not important in society. Secondly, they tell you about how women are seen as the cleanest in the homes, their labor. We think in those conserved societies that's still going to exist. That means you're not prioritizing the woman as most marginalized. But secondly, if you think the family structures that exist within society are harmful, then change and create a narrative that speaks to the family structures. Not just simply assuming that women should not have children changes the family structures, but are specifically harmful to women. Because also prescribed gender roles are explicitly harmful. At the point in which you in your member speech that those sort of narratives are harmful, then change those narratives and not encourage women to not have children. We think that narrative does not explicitly have a direct impact on those women, but also it speaks on the general idea of what societies and governments should do as opposed to the general identity of those individuals. Lastly, they tell you about infertile women and queer women. We think the narrative still in society is harmful. When you say don't have children does not mean you're encouraging those individuals to have children or not. What you're simply saying is that those people could not have children anyway. That means it assumes that these people are not going to be assimilating in any society whatsoever. But moreover this, on the idea of what a general case is built on, is that the dominant narrative still exists. Opening governments to the context very clearly that the dominant narrative is decreasing or weakening, especially in the society in which we exist. This means that when you create a narrative that's much more harmful or much larger than the narrative that exists, that means the weakening narrative is going to weaken even more, and that the creation of a new narrative is going to harm those individuals. This is exactly what Morena tells you on patriarchy, why patriarchy was the imposition of a narrative that was beyond those sort of narratives that existed in society. Opening.
Thank you. What we're saying is that there are thousands of women that are taking a decision with life-lasting consequences, and they cannot afford to wait for another narrative. So can you tell me how your impacts are bigger and heavier than an impact that lasts for the long life of thousands of women worldwide?
Well, this is very weird. They say that a narrative exists, and because the narrative exists, it's harmful. Then they also say that the narrative is weakening. That means the certain measures that we're taking now is weakening. That means the narrative is weakening in itself. But also intuitively say that the women are undecided in those states. That means they don't have a narrative to fall back on. This is very counterproductive on their side because they don't prove exactly which narrative should we create. On their side, what they're doing is that they don't need another narrative because the general narrative of women should do something or women should have children is weakening and in itself is very subsequently not existing in society. But let's come to their case. The reason why first we're different from our opening is that it assumes that the government is doing this initiative in itself. Firstly, when they talk about paternal leave, flexible working hours, the alternative speaks on when government is actively not encouraging women to do this. But what we're very different is that the choice in which they speak of is the choice of religious states, and while religious states and women in those societies inherently very important. We think we don't even have to speak to religious states in themselves. We think in general, when you have two narratives which are completely comparable for women to have the ability to discern what they feel is important to them is very important. We cannot just assume that women have children based on the idea that society believes that children are very important to women. We think it's also very important to notice how society works in its function. Go into the biggest argument that they give in today's debate. They say that when you make a choice, there are two competing narratives. We think you can have the ability to critique a certain narrative without creating a new narrative. This means that when the feminist movement was looking at why men are specifically harmful, they did not create a feminist idea and say that, well, men in general are supposed to die because we think that men have been very oppressive. You can critique the general idea of any narrative without actually creating a new one. Morena tells you this when he tells you about the shared identity of 1880ness and choice and fulfillment. Notice here that closing opposition speaks mainly on how human beings are very complex, and you cannot just assume that they share the same sentiments even though they exist in different societies. We think on our side what we more do is that we allow for women to identify one, especially in the certain societies in which they want to do. That's where choice feminism comes. But we think the state is also compelled in a form of buy-in because the state wants its best women to decide in what levels in which societies they want to exist. At the point at which you don't allow the fulfillment of women to exist and allow for women to look at children as a harm and also in a suppressive system, you're literally saying as the government that children are very harmful and very specifically very patriarchal. That means you allow for anti-natalist ideas to exist without actually creating the narrative in the context that exists. They can't simply say they will not speak into the context even though they're not even in the context in today's debate. Besides the closing opposition, because we allow for women to be emancipated from the set of oppression that exists, but also we speak on her gender roles, if that's the harm, that we speak to those things as opposed to actually demonizing children in society. Besides the closing opposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that debate. It was really enjoyable.